Hello everybody, my name is Mr. Henderson and I'm going to introduce for you Module 12, the Enlightenment. We're going to take a look at this period in history which starts around 1450, depending on how far back you want to go. Some would take it back to not even that, 1500 perhaps. But really it starts with the beginning of the scientific revolution. This propels all the questions that are going to change the way we view the world. During this module, we have several objectives, things that we need to accomplish and that we really hope that you retain as you move forward as students. We need you to be able to describe how the Enlightenment scientists challenged the way scholars viewed the world by introducing various theories and methods that are going to challenge those ideas. Explore how Enlightenment thinkers criticized traditional worldviews and laid the basis for modern democratic revolutions, things that we still see happening today. We want you to be able to discuss how the Enlightenment ideas shaped art, literature, music, architecture, and politics during those times, and then how those ideals will impact our world moving forward. Also, to summarize how the Enlightenment spirit inspired revolutions and brought democracy, most importantly, to America for us and elsewhere around the world. Big questions we want to be able to answer at the end of this is in what ways were the ideas introduced by European scientists and thinkers between the 15 and 1700s? How were they revolutionary? And we'll talk about that term too. Smaller questions that we want to consider. What were some of the revolutionary ideas introduced by European scientists that challenged the status quo, which means the way things are, our current normal way of doing things? That's the status quo. We also want to understand what revolutionary ideas introduced by European thinkers formed the basis for the modern democratic movement. Be able to answer, would the social changes inspired by Enlightenment ideals be considered revolutionary? And then explain those out. All of a sudden, that paused for some reason. We also want to answer, how did Enlightenment philosophers influence American revolutionaries? And lastly, what does it mean to be enlightened? Now, these are big module questions. These are questions that will take a couple weeks to get through, but some of them we can answer today. The things that we'll be covering in this module are Lesson 1, the scientific revolution, which I'll be covering in my next video. Lesson 2, Enlightenment thinkers, where you're going to hear from Mrs. Bodis. In Lesson 3, we're going to discuss how the Enlightenment is able to spread, its impact, and the legacy it leaves behind. And there we'll hear from Mr. Powell. And lastly, we're going to talk about the American Revolution and how the Enlightenment is going to inspire it and propel it forward. For this, we'll hear from Mr. Millett. But today, let's talk about how we got here to the Enlightenment. As we're going to learn in history, to understand the time that we're studying, we often want to go back a little bit before so we can see what led us in that direction. So what period came before the Enlightenment? And usually when I have students in class, we're able to kind of, have you guys throw some answers out and I can, bounce around and work our way towards the actual answer. And many of you are probably thinking at home, medieval times. That is the period of medieval times, the middle period, the Middle Ages. And then many of us may even settle on something known as the Dark Ages. But the Dark Ages weren't about the world being in shadows. It wasn't about the sun being blotted out and that we were literally in a dark period of time. Although there is a major, what would be considered a minor ice age during this period, which did cast a lot of the world in shadows. But that is not what this term means. The Dark Ages refers to intellectual darkness. For nearly 1,000 years from the fall of Rome leading up to this period that we're talking about now, the Enlightenment, we are going to be in intellectual darkness. Before this period of being inspired by the Renaissance and then into the Enlightenment, where did we even get our information? What did we How did we get the things that we did know, the very little that we did know? Well, first it came from the government, where you questioned nothing. Whatever the king or queen or whoever was ruling your local area said, that went. And if you challenged it, you suffered severe consequences. Then we come to the church. And at this time, it is the Holy Roman Catholic Church, the only Christian religion that the Western world has. And again, anything they say goes. To challenge their authority is not only to challenge them as individuals, as humans on earth, and their manly authority, their human authority, but to challenge God's authority. And lastly, we looked to ancient scholars, the ancients, the ones, this golden era that came before, where we learned everything we could possibly know. And if you challenged the ideas of the ancient scholars, men like Aristotle or Ptolemy, it was kind of like, who do you think you are? You're a peasant, and you think that you know more? Or you were born in this era, even as a Tycho Brahe. You think you know more than Plato? Wow, you got quite the ego. So it was very, very difficult for new ideas to rise to the top, for challenges to old ideas that may turn out to be more correct when we reevaluate them were often dismissed and ignored because of these things. So we then get to this point of enlightenment. So what does it mean to enlighten? Go ahead and pause the video for a second, open a new tab, and just type that word into Google, enlighten. Come back in a few seconds and think about what you found. All right, hopefully you took that opportunity to do that. And here's what it means to enlighten, to give intellectual or spiritual light to. This isn't a literal thing. When I walk in the room and I turn on the light bulbs, I have literally enlightened the place. But that's not what we talk about when we talk about the Enlightenment. It's intellectual light. These bright ideas, the light bulbs going off, or maybe even spiritual light. Why are we here? What is the meaning of life? It also means to instruct, to teach. And that's what we are doing here. That's what we as educators are hoping to do at every turn, is enlighten our students. Bring them intellectual light. Instruct them in how to do mathematics and how to proceed in science and how to break down ideologies and social sciences. But that takes teaching and learning and the imparting of knowledge. This is what we do as parents. This is what we do as coaches. This is what we do as teachers. This is what we do as rabbis and priests, Sunday school teachers, driver's ed instructors. We pass along the things that we know so that you that follow behind us are going to be able to not only have the kind of lives that we live, but build upon them and know more and be better. Again, go ahead and pause this, and there's a line on your notes for you. Use enlighten in a sentence. Come up with your own sentence just so that you have kind of a handle on what this term means. Again, go ahead and pause and take a second to do that. Restart the video when you're ready. What we're going to find is that the period of enlightenment is going to revolutionize many, many things. But first off, what does that term revolutionize mean? To revolutionize means to bring about radical change, drastic, major change. Not just regular everyday change. Not everything is a revolution. I change my socks every day. I'm not having a sock revolution. I change what I eat every day. I'm not having a diet revolution. We're talking about radical, major, systemic changes that are going to change the way that human beings at large are going to have different modes of life than they did yesterday. That's radical. So what kind of things are going to be radically revolutionized? Art is going to change. The way that we perceive art, the way that we can create art, and even the meaning of a lot of our art is going to be revolutionized. Science is going to be the first thing that we touch upon, and we're going to find that many of the things that we thought in the past are wrong. We are going to radically change, revolutionize the way that we, and I mean this almost literally, view the universe. Government is going to be radically changed. Systems that have been in place for thousands of years are going to come crumbling down with new ideas because we ask questions. Religion is going to experience a radical revolutionary change. We're going to see rising, questioning not only our governments and our science, but also our faiths and our faith leaders. We're going to begin reading things for ourselves and begin questioning the rules that are being placed on us. And from that, we're going to see separations within religions, Protestants versus Catholics. And other things like music, literature, fashion, art, all of these, architecture, all of these things are going to be radically revolutionized because of this period, the Enlightenment. And it all starts from one thing. How is this possible? There's one thing that gets us to do this. Asking questions. Questioning authority. Questioning the status quo. Being curious, wanting to know more. Discovery of the truth. In this period of time, what we're going to find is that our thinkers and our leaders of this movement, they aren't going to be so necessarily concerned with outcomes as long as those outcomes are the truth. They don't want to be told fairy tales. They don't want to be told big stories. They want answers. And that is my first lesson, I think, for all of you as students, is that you need to demand answers. We get one of these lives, guys, and there's truth out there to be found. And a famous quote out there is that it's not necessarily the discovery of truth that is so exciting and compelling, but the journey to it. And that's what education gives us. That's what the Enlightenment is going to propel us into, is this pursuit of truth, this journey, this adventure to find out more about the world at large, to challenge old ideas and create new ones, all in the hope of making humankind, mankind, and our time on earth so much better. So I encourage you guys, ask questions, challenge authority. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful sense. Going in there and, when your teacher says something, to say, how do you know? But to expect the truth. Demand it. Expect more of your teachers. Demand more from us. Email us. If you have confused, that's why we tell you when you're confused, when you don't know, raise your hand, ask questions. You have a right to know more. Exercise that right. And it's very, very easy. All you need to do is ask questions. So what are some questions that we can ask about some current issues? Things like art, science, government, and religion. So I'm going to give you guys, again, a minute. Go ahead and pause the video and come up with some big questions that you can ask about today. Today, I'm not talking about in the past, in history. Think about this today. What are some things you can do to challenge the way that we think about art today? Science today. What are some questions you can ask? Go ahead and pause, and again, restart the video when you're ready. So here are some questions that I came up with for these topics. For instance, art. This is a piece of art. This is actually at the Met in New York. And this is a giant canvas, which to me looks like a giant green blob. But this to me is where I would look at and I go, is this art? I would challenge that, right? And many of you may look at this and say, no, it's about what the artist wanted to perceive, what the artist wanted to convey. I look at it and I say, if I can do it, it ain't art, because I'm not good at art. But I feel like I could pull this one off. What about in science? This is always a good one. Where do we come from? Did we come from monkeys? Did we come from something else? How did we get here? That's a big scientific question. What about government? These Patriot Acts that we have in place, where should we give up our privacy, for instance? And in any case, having fear drive us. Should we give up our freedoms to get more security? Should we sacrifice security to get more freedoms? Big questions. And what about religion? Just again, a simple one. Does God exist? Right? So these are all big questions that we need to continue asking, and others that I'm sure many of you have written down, because we deserve answers as human beings, as heirs to this earth. We deserve answers. And the only way to get them is by asking questions. And that, everybody, is what the Enlightenment is all about. From here, we'll move into lesson 1, which will be the scientific revolution. And it's going to cover much of what I kind of discussed here. So I'll see you guys next time.